They say family is the safest place on earth, but what if that very place is where you first wished you could disappear from the world? There are wounds that don't bleed. There are nightmares that begin in broad daylight. And there are children who grow up in silence, not because they have nothing to say, but because no one is willing to listen. Millions carry a childhood suffocated by the very hands meant to protect them. Toxic parents, abusive siblings, secrets buried beneath the facade of a happy family. And they grow up haunted by a burning question: was it my fault? Or was I simply never worthy of love to begin with? If you ever lived in a home filled with shouting, where no one stood up for you, if you carry memories no one believes are real, if you've ever told yourself, "I will never tell this to anyone," then this video is for you. My name is Louise, but everyone calls me Grandma Lou, and this is the story I've kept hidden for over 60 years. A story not just about pain, but about trust betrayed, survival in the dark, and the journey to rise again from the ashes. If you have the courage to stay until the end, I promise, you'll find a part of yourself somewhere in this journey. And maybe, just maybe, that could be the beginning of your own healing. I grew up in a house with a backyard, white lace curtains, and a wooden swing that creaked gently on summer evenings. On the outside, everything looked like a perfect snapshot of 1950s suburban America. A kind mother always wearing an apron, a truck-driving father who was often away, and us kids, 4 siblings, always dressed neatly for Sunday church. But the truth was never like the Christmas photo hanging on the wall. I was the youngest, the little sister who was always told to be good, to be polite, and to never speak about family matters. I don't remember when exactly my small room, with porcelain dolls and crayon drawings, became a place where I didn't dare turn off the light. I don't remember the first night Anthony, my oldest brother, came into my room. Maybe I was 12, maybe younger. At first, it was just a gentle threat, something like, "If you tell Mom or Dad, I'll say you made it up." But the threats turned into control, and the control turned into hell. I tried to explain it away. Maybe they're just joking. Maybe I did something wrong. I believed that if I stayed silent long enough, it would stop. But it didn't stop. It only repeated and got worse. Every time I heard footsteps coming up the stairs after midnight, my body froze. Not because I didn't know who it was, but because I knew exactly who it was. And the worst part, it wasn't just one of them. Joseph, the second oldest, used to be the one who gave me candy, who helped draw my birthday cards. But then he started showing up on the nights Anthony wasn't home. No apology, no eye contact. Then came Robert, the youngest of the 3. At first, he sat crying at the edge of my bed and whispered, "They make me do it. If I don't, they'll hurt me." I forgave Robert. At the time, I thought, at least he can still cry. I never told my mother. She was always tired, always had headaches, and feared any kind of conflict. And I certainly didn't tell my father, the man I loved most in the world. He worked himself to the bone to support our family. Whenever he came home, he kissed my mother on the cheek, patted me on the head, and said, "How's Daddy's little princess today?" How could I ever tell him that his beloved sons were destroying his princess, night after night? So I hid it all. I smiled through dinner. I read the Bible when asked. I endured. And little by little, I disappeared. No one noticed that the once bubbly Louise had grown quiet. No one asked why I flinched when someone touched my shoulder. No one saw the bruises, because I had learned how to hide them well. I was just a child, and I thought I would have to live with it forever. Until one day, my body began to change. A change that couldn't be hidden, couldn't be denied or explained away. And that body finally spoke all the words I had never dared to say. I was only 13 when my body began to betray the secrets I had tried so hard to bury. I threw up every morning, my head spun, my back ached, and then my period never came. At first I thought I was just sick, maybe the flu, maybe stress. I was used to my body silently absorbing the things I couldn't say out loud, but this time, silence was no longer an option. One morning, while Mom was folding clothes in the laundry room, I whispered, barely louder than a breath, "I think I need to see a doctor." She looked up, her eyes filled with a mix of worry and suspicion. "What's wrong?" I hesitated. I've been nauseous a lot, and I haven't had my period for 2 months." She put down the shirt in her hands. Her fingers, still mid-fold, trembled slightly. "Did you eat something strange? Maybe it's just hormones." But the next day, she took me to the clinic. The way the doctor looked at her, quick, cold, and then pulled up a chair to sit closer to me, speaking slowly, word by word, as if handling a live bomb. "Do you know that you're pregnant?" My entire body froze. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt like a massive boulder had collapsed onto my chest. My mother, on the other hand, jumped to her feet and screamed in panic. "What? That's not possible. She's only..." The doctor stayed remarkably calm. "We'll run all the necessary tests, but the results don't lie." On the drive home, Mom didn't say a word. She gripped the steering wheel so tight her knuckles turned white. I stared out the window, feeling like I was drifting through a storm with no end in sight. That night, when Dad got home, Mom pulled him into the bedroom and slammed the door. I sat in the living room, heart pounding like a drum. Through the thin walls, I could hear them arguing, quietly but sharply. "That's impossible. Louise is a good girl. Who else has access to her every day? Who else is in this house?" "What are you saying, Connie? Who do you think would do such a thing?" I heard something crash to the floor, then silence. A silence heavier than the darkness outside the window. About an hour later, Dad came out. His face was flushed red, his lips tightly pressed together. He walked straight to me, knelt down, and grabbed my hand, so tightly I thought I couldn't pull away. "You have to tell me," he whispered. "Who did this to you?" I looked up, eyes brimming with tears. In that moment, I could have told him everything. I could have named every single one. But I thought of Mom, of the brokenness in her eyes, of Dad, who still believed family was sacred. I couldn't destroy him the way my brothers had destroyed me. So I whispered, "I don't know." I didn't see their faces. There were 3 of them. They wore masks. And just like that, I created a lie. One that would haunt me for the rest of my life. I thought the lie would make everything go away. I believed that if I created a story convincing enough, 3 masked strangers appearing out of nowhere in the night, I could preserve what was left of my family. I could keep my father from falling apart, keep my mother from losing her mind, and keep the family secrets within the family. What I didn't know was that the lie would be the beginning of another nightmare. My father turned into a different man. No more big laughs over baseball, no more long-haul stories from the road. He stayed up night after night, replaying every detail I told him, questioning neighbors, searching every corner of Riverdale for the 3 strangers I had made up. He stopped at gas stations, parking lots, motels all over town. He even hired a private investigator. Each night he came home with that haunted look on his face, repeating the same words. No one saw anything, not a single soul. How is that possible? I sat quietly in the corner of the room, unable to tell the truth, unable to take it back. My mother sank into her own chaos. She made me read the Bible every day, cut out my favorite foods, limited my contact with anyone, not to protect me, but to control me. "We need to live more properly," she said. "God is testing us. You have to protect the family's image." I nodded like a puppet. I didn't have the strength to fight, and I wasn't sure fighting would even matter anymore. As for my brothers, they played their roles like seasoned actors. Anthony, the ringleader, suddenly became unusually caring. He'd drop by my room with pastries, asking if I needed anything. "If you ever need help, just say the word. I'm always here." The irony was suffocating, because here was exactly why I no longer felt safe in my own home. Joseph kept his distance. He barely spoke to me. but his eyes said everything: guilt, fear, avoidance. But not enough courage to tell the truth. And Robert, the only one who had ever cried, all but disappeared. He barely left his room, ate erratically, and woke in the middle of the night with nightmares. I could hear the rapid breathing, the pounding against the wall, like he was fighting himself in his sleep. At school, I became a ghost. Everyone knew, or thought they knew. The girl's pregnant. They say she was raped. 3 strangers? Or maybe someone from inside the house? No one asked me directly, but their eyes, their stares, were sharp as blades. The teachers tried to act normal, but I saw it, the pity in their eyes. And that hurt even more than judgment. During recess, I sat alone. At lunch, no one chose the seat next to mine. Even the ones who used to call me friend quietly turned away. I began dreaming of standing in the middle of an empty room, screaming until my voice broke. But no one heard me. No one at all. One night, I opened my closet, reached for my old doll, my favorite toy from a time before I knew what fear was. I sat on the floor, clutching it to my chest, and whispered, "We'll never talk about this, not ever. We'll stay quiet, forever." I thought that was the only way to survive, but I later learned silence is where the darkness grows. And with every passing day, I was slowly disappearing. By the 4th month of pregnancy, my belly began to show. Not clearly, not enough for strangers to notice, but to me, it was a siren. I could no longer hide behind oversized sweaters or stay locked in my room forever. Once again, my body was betraying the secret I tried so hard to bury. Every morning, I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger. The 13-year-old girl who used to sing in the shower and dream of becoming an artist now stared at her stomach like it was proof of a crime she didn't commit, but was being forced to carry. One day, while I was sitting in class, the pain hit. Not regular cramps, but the kind of pain that takes your breath away, that makes it impossible to sit up straight. I doubled over my desk, tears streaming down before I could stop them. My teacher called an ambulance. The whole school was in a frenzy. When my mother arrived at the hospital, her face was pale. I'll never forget that look. Fear, not entirely for me, but as if she was terrified of what I might say. The doctor took her out of the room, then turned to me. "Louise, we need to know, who is the father of the baby?" I didn't answer. I turned my face to the wall. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would break through my ribs. Not because I was afraid of the doctor. I was afraid of the answer. Afraid that the truth would destroy whatever was left of my family, even though it had been breaking for a long time. After hours of tests and scans, the doctor returned with a serious expression. My mother walked in behind him, hands clasped tightly, eyes avoiding mine. "We've found signs of abnormal development," the doctor said. "It's likely the baby isn't growing properly." I didn't fully understand what he meant, but my mother did. She broke down in tears. "Oh dear God, no." A few days later, I had a miscarriage. My small body, after carrying too much for too long, finally gave out. I remember lying in the hospital bed, the bright white lights hurting my eyes, my hands ice cold. No one spoke. My mother sat turned away. The nurse checked the monitors in silence. I wanted to ask, is it over now? Is it finally done? But it wasn't. Endings don't come that easily. The physical pain disappeared faster than I expected, but the emptiness, that stayed forever. My mother brought me home. No one mentioned the pregnancy. No one asked how I felt. We just went on living, as if it had never happened. But some things, once they exist, never truly leave you. I knew I had lost that baby. But what hurt even more was this. I wasn't allowed to grieve, because no one ever let me acknowledge that it had even been real. A week after I lost the baby, my father took an extended leave from work and stayed home. No more long hauls, no more excuses like urgent delivery. He just wandered around the house, watching everyone closely, as if trying to piece together something that didn't add up. I barely left my room. Those four walls were the only place where I felt at peace. Not because I was safe, but because at least there, I didn't have to play a role. Not the good daughter, not the victim, not the guilty one. I didn't eat much, didn't speak, just lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling like my mind was floating somewhere outside my body. Then one afternoon, Dad knocked on my door. He didn't wait for a response, just came in. It was the first time he'd entered my room since I returned from the hospital. He wasn't carrying anger or questions. He was carrying paperwork. "I got the blood test results from the hospital," he said, sitting on the edge of my bed. And I couldn't help but notice. The baby's DNA is a very close match to a direct relative. I looked up, my throat burning dry. "What do you mean?" He looked at me, not with rage, not with shouting, just sadness, the kind of sadness that ages a man overnight. "Was it someone in the house who hurt you?" I turned my face away, gripped the blanket tightly. My heart felt like it was being torn in half. One half begged me to tell the truth. The other screamed, "Don't! If you say it, everything will fall apart." "I don't remember." "They wore masks," I whispered, repeating the old lie like a survival instinct. Dad nodded, but I saw it. He didn't believe me. And for the first time, I saw in his eyes not disappointment, but the pain of a man beginning to question the very house he had built. The next day, I found him standing in the kitchen, staring at the 3 framed photos on the wall, pictures of Anthony, Joseph, and Robert. He stood there for a long time, gripping his coffee cup, not taking a sip. Mom, meanwhile, kept trying to hold everything together. She did more laundry, cooked more meals, as if staying busy enough would prevent her from having to face the growing silence between us all. She often said things like, "We need to move on, the sooner, the better." But I knew she had her doubts too, because every time I walked into the room, she turned her face away. Cracks had started to form, in our eyes, in our silences, in the questions no one dared to ask. Then one night, as I was getting ready for bed, Robert knocked on my door. "I'm sorry," he said, voice trembling. "For what?" I asked, though I already knew. "For not stopping them, for not protecting you." I said nothing. We stood there in silence, me and the brother who had once been my only hope that at least one heart in that trio still felt. "I know, if you speak up, everything will fall apart. But if you don't, you will fall apart. And I don't want to watch you disappear, Louise." He left after that. The door closed softly behind him. But what he left behind was a crack of light, the first, in the heavy wall I had built for years. I still wasn't ready to speak. But for the first time, I began to want someone to listen, and that was when the silence began to break. Every lie has an expiration date, and I had reached mine. It started with something that seemed small. Robert disappeared from the house for 3 days without explanation. When he returned, he no longer avoided me like before. His face was tense, eyes sunken, but no longer filled with guilt or fear, as if he had stopped seeing me as the ghost of a buried secret. That evening during dinner, Robert put down his fork. His hand trembled slightly. "I have something to say." Everyone looked up. Dad stopped chewing, Mom froze mid-pour, and Anthony and Joseph exchanged a glance. Nervous, fleeting. Robert took a deep breath. Then, as if he ripped his whole heart out and placed it on the table. "Louise didn't lie. There were no masked men. Everything happened in this house, and we all know who did it." The air turned thick. No one reacted at first. Then Anthony shot to his feet. "What the hell are you saying? You've lost your mind!" Joseph slammed his hand on the table. "Shut up, Robert! You don't know what you're doing!" But Robert didn't take his eyes off Dad. He stared straight at him, like this was the only moment he could finally live his truth. "Dad, I'm sorry I didn't speak sooner, but I can't let Louise carry this alone anymore." I sat frozen, my heart pounding, my throat dry and tight. The whole room felt frozen in time. Dad slowly set his knife down. He stood up. No yelling, no accusations. He just walked toward Anthony, the eldest son he had once been most proud of. "Was it you?" he asked, voice barely a whisper. Anthony looked away, then gave a faint, cold smile, one I'll never forget. "She made it up, Dad. The girl just wants attention. And Robert? He's clearly been unstable for a while now." Anthony's biggest mistake was trying to lie to a father who had already lost his entire world. Dad lunged at him. Everything that followed was a storm, chaotic and uncontrollable. Shouts, crashing, Mom screaming Dad's name, Joseph trying to pull him off, Robert standing between us, shielding me in his arms. I don't remember how long it took the police to arrive. I just remember clutching Robert's hand, as if letting go meant I would fall into the abyss. I was taken to the hospital after suffering a panic attack. Dad was taken away in handcuffs, but after the investigation, he was released, fully cooperating with detectives. Anthony and Joseph were arrested later that week. Robert went to the police himself to volunteer as a witness. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He only said, "I was part of this. I stayed silent too long, and now I choose the right side." The truth finally came to light, not because I was brave enough to speak, but because someone chose to stop running for me. And the strangest thing was, when everything finally fell apart, I wasn't afraid anymore. I just felt light. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to hide. I wasn't the girl with the shameful secret. I wasn't the ghost. I was Louise. And for the first time, people called me by my real name. Not that girl, not the victim, not the one who tore the family apart. Just Louise, a girl who survived hell, and finally stepped into the light. 2 weeks after the final testimony, my mother woke me early on a Sunday morning. She didn't say much. She just placed a small suitcase on my bed, a few neatly folded clothes, and an old photo album I thought she had thrown away long ago. "Let's go," she said without meeting my eyes. "Go where?" I asked, barely able to believe it. "To a place where you can start over." I didn't ask more questions. Not because I trusted her, but because I was too tired to resist. And a part of me, a small part, had started to long for escape, to become someone else, somewhere far away. We left Riverdale on the 6 a.m. bus. Mom said Dad had arranged a new job in New Hope, a small town a few hours' drive away. "A place where no one knows our past," she said. We arrived in the afternoon. The town was quiet, sparse houses, no friends, no nosy neighbors. No one who knew I was the girl who got pregnant at 13. I was enrolled in a new school, St. Mary's. The uniform was long skirts and high-collared shirts. My face, long since stripped of any innocence, carried only silence and caution. I didn't hope for friendship. I didn't want attention. All I wanted was to disappear into the crowd. And there, I became a walking shadow. Class, home, reading, sleep, day after day. But then, one late afternoon in the library, I heard someone laugh. A bright, unfiltered laugh, genuine, not forced like the laughter that used to echo in my old house. I looked up. A curly-haired girl was telling jokes to her friends. The evening sun lit up her face, and for a moment, it left me breathless. I used to laugh like that, I thought. That night, sitting by the window of our rented room, I picked up a pen and wrote in my journal, for the first time in months. My name is Louise. I am not a lie. I am not a girl defined by shame. I am someone who survived. And from that day forward, I began stepping, slowly, out of myself. Each morning, I tried one small thing. Starting a conversation with a classmate. Sitting by the window instead of the back row. Joining the book club. I started drawing again. Simple pencil sketches of places I dreamed of visiting. No longer rooms of darkness. Only hills, skies, and a smiling version of myself. My mother kept her distance. She never mentioned the past. But I noticed how she quietly let me choose my clothes, stay up late reading, carve out small corners of freedom. like a silent apology she didn't know how to say out loud. Dad came to New Hope a month later. He didn't ask many questions, but every night he knocked gently on my door and left a cup of hot chocolate on my desk. "You can start over," he said once, as we sat together on the porch steps. "But you don't have to erase the past, and you don't need to." At the time, I didn't fully understand what he meant, but later I did. Healing isn't about forgetting. It's about learning to carry the pain without letting it define you. I got pregnant just 6 months after our wedding. When the test showed 2 lines, I sat for hours in the bathroom, hands over my belly, heart pounding like it was trying to escape my chest. Not because I wasn't ready to be a mother, but because I was afraid. I wouldn't know how. How does someone who grew up in fear teach another how to love? How does a heart once shattered hold a tiny life without trembling? I was afraid I'd become like my mother, not cruel, but silent. Not heartless, but someone who made her children suffer for the sake of family reputation. But then something strange happened. When I felt my baby's first kick, I wasn't afraid anymore. I felt grateful, because I knew, this time, I would not stay silent. Charles would place his hand on my belly every night. He read poems to our child. He sketched a little picture, a wooden house, a flower garden, and a baby being held by its mother. That mother was me. "What do you think we'll name the baby?" I asked. "I don't know," he smiled. "But I do know one thing. Our child will grow up in the light." And he was right. When our son was born, we named him James. I made a vow, right there in the delivery room. "You will never have to live in the shadows like your mother did." I'm not a perfect mother. I've flinched when James cried too loud. I've frozen when his tiny arms wrapped tightly around my neck. The old memories are still there, buried deep like dried roots beneath the soil. But this time, I don't let them control me. I've learned to breathe with my child, to hear his cries without fearing them. I don't teach him that silence is good. I teach him that every feeling has a place to be felt. When he asked, "Mom, were you ever sad when you were little?" I didn't lie. I simply said, "I was very sad, but I'm healing now, partly because of you." And he nodded, as if he understood. In the way only children can. No need for explanation. Just love. Each night I read him stories. We have a rocking chair by the window. I sit there with him in my arms and tell tales of rabbits, bears, and flying princesses. But really, I'm telling those stories to myself. To the little Louise who once dreamed of hearing her mother's gentle voice beside her. I'm not trying to give my son a perfect childhood. I just want him to know something I never did. You are loved, unconditionally. Not because you're good, not because you're smart, but simply because you are you. Now, at 73, I live in a small house with a garden full of purple flowers, where each morning I water the plants, brew a cup of tea, and sit under the porch listening to the birds sing, as if life had never tried to break me. Charles passed away 11 years ago. He left in his sleep, gently, peacefully, just as he had lived. I miss him every single day, but I no longer ache, because I know I once had a love that was real. James is a father now. He calls me every week to tell me about his kids. My grandchildren who run through the yard yelling, "Grandma Lou, tell us another story." And I tell them with all the gentleness I once dreamed of receiving. I tell them without fear. Because I've learned the most important truth. Pain can only be defeated when we're brave enough to call it by its name. I no longer hide. I no longer feel ashamed. And if you're watching this, if you were ever hurt by the very people meant to protect you, if you've ever felt like there was nothing left to hold on to, if you've ever wished you could disappear, please hear me. It was not your fault. You did not deserve it, and you can keep going, just like I did. I am Louise. I'm not that girl, not the troublemaker, not the family's shame. I am a woman who walked through the dark and didn't fall. I am a mother, a grandmother, a wife. I am proof that sometimes, even from the darkest places, life can grow. You may not get to choose where your story begins, but you can always choose where it goes from here. And if you're still breathing, then your story is far from over. There is still hope.